Boisai, let's get started. We're doing the sugya of Kol Isha this week. Listening to women sing. What's a problem? What's not a problem? Could you do a davar shib kedusha when somebody's singing? Let's get started. So the Gemara in Brachas, Daf Chavdalim and Aleph, discusses the halacha of Asur L'Kroya Kriya Shema Lifnei Erva. So if there's somebody natznius in front of you, it's asur to say Kriya Shema in front of that person. And it's not just Kriya Shema, it's asur to speak in learning, it's asur to say brachas in front of somebody that is natznius, what Chazal call erva. Amar Shmuel, Kol Isha erva. So the voice, the way we usually understand it is the singing of a woman is erva. So if that woman is singing, you're not going to be able to go and say Kriya Shema in front of that woman. The Mordechai brings Rav Haigayin that this issur is only issur bisman Kriya Shema. It's asur to say, Lefi the Mordechai quotes Rav Haigayin, it's asur to say Kriya Shema in front of a woman when a woman's singing. But other than that, you want to listen because it's the hate. However, the Rosh, the Rambam, and Rav Rishonim say that Kol Isha is a erva in general, and it's not only during Kriya Shema that you can't hear a woman sing, but hearing a woman sing is always a problem. Kol Isha be'erva in general. The Shulchan Aruch paskins like Rav Rishonim that listening to a woman sing is a problem in general. It's always asur. Now, is the issur of Kol Isha issur deraisa, or is it just the issur derabanan? So the Rambam says somebody who listens to Kol Isha gets makas mardis. Now, if you know, makas mardis is makas derabanan. Must mean that the Rambam holds that Kol Isha is the issur derabanan. The Chai Adam says that it's the issur derabanan. And the Mishnah Berurah brings the Chai Adam and paskins that we treat the issur of Kol Isha as a issur derabanan. There's a Gemara that says, I think it was Avodah Zarah or Sanhedrin, I don't remember, one of the two, I believe, that says that if men start singing and then the women respond, there's some form of musical something that goes on with this one side says, and then the other side responds. So if the men start and the women respond, that's pritzas. If the women start and the men respond, that's like putting fire to flax, which will burn up right away. That's really, really bad. That's worse. Now, why is it worse? Rashi asks, why is it worse when the women start and the men respond? The reason why it's worse is because the men need to listen to the women sing and focus on the women singing to know when they get up to their part. And therefore, it is worse. Okay, so there's two different Shulchan Aruchs. There's one Shulchan Aruch in Even HaEzer, and there's one Shulchan Aruch in Orach Chaim by Kriya Shema. So the Shulchan Aruch and Even HaEzer, that's Ishus, that's the general halachos of Arayas. So over there in Even HaEzer, Chaf Aleph Aleph, it says, Asur Lishmaya Kol Erva. So we bring down this Issur, you're not allowed to hear the Kol Erva. From the Shulchan Aruch, we learn that it's Asur to listen to an Erva. However, if a woman isn't an erva, you would be allowed to listen to them sing. So if somebody wants to listen to their wife sing, or if somebody wants to listen to their mother sing, they would be allowed, no issur would apply. Now, there is another Shulchan Aruch, which is in Hilchos Kriya Shema, Orach Chaim, Ayin Hey Gimel, which says, Yesh lezayer mishmias kol Zemer Isha B'Shas Kriya Shema. And the Ramah adds that Afilu B'Ishtari, one's not even allowed to listen to their wife sing while saying Kriya Shema. However, the Ramah says, Aval Kol Haragel Bai Ein Erva. A voice that you are used to hearing, that is not Erva. So during Kriya Shema or Brachos or Torah, one can't listen to the singing of any Isha, even their relative. Side note, just to note, when in general the halacha of not learning Torah or saying in front of an erva, whether it's the kol, the voice of the erva, or whether it's the lady's not dressed so properly, that's speaking in Torah. One still is allowed to think in Torah in front of an erva. But when it comes to things like Kriya Shema, brachas, benching, right? It doesn't help to think Kriya Shema. Kriya Shema, you need to speak Kriya Shema. You need to say Kriya Shema, and therefore there's no way of doing that in front of the erva. Now, noticed by the general issur in Ishus, it says erva. Whereas by Kriya Shema, when the Shulchan Aruch is discussing Kriya Shema, it says that it's a problem even if she isn't an erva. I mean, it just says the Kol Isha. Because once again, that just backs up what we were saying until now. When it's Kriya Shema, it's a problem, any woman, even if she's your relative. But when we're dealing with general arayas, it's only general, not during Kriya Shema time. It's only a problem if she's the erva. The Mishnah Berurah is medayik. Then in general, there wouldn't be a issur if she wasn't an erva. So in theory, listening to the kol of a penuya, let's say a penuya, a single girl is singing, the chayra, it should be allowed. However, as the Mishnah Berurah points out, it has very little practical nafkaminas, because l'meisa, we hold that a nida is considered like an erva, and therefore you're not allowed to listen to the kol, the singing of a nida, and we consider our women to be nidas, and our single women are nidas, and therefore it would be a problem. There's not much practical difference. Okay, now from what age does the issur start? So, according to some, the Chazon Ish and Rosh Zalman, from age 3, the little girl, when she comes back from Gan, you cannot listen. I'm not talking about your daughter. Your neighbor's daughter, the 3-year-old that comes back from Gan, you can't listen to her sing. That is what the Chazon Ish and Rosh Zalman paskin. Rav Elyashiv says it's from age 7 or 8. Once they start looking like a somewhat developed girl, 7 or 8, from that point it's issur to listen to them sing. Rav Moshe says that if you need to, you could listen to a girl sing up to the age of 11, up to the age when we expect that she reached Zman Nidus. And L'maisa, Rav Moshe is mashma in the Mishnah Berurah, because the Mishnah Berurah said that a pnuya is allowed, it's just the issue of Nidus, so it really, Rav Moshe is the pashtus based on the Mishnah Berurah, but each to their own in that psak. Now, by Kriya Shema, you notice that there's a little bit of a different lashon. But when it came to general erva, it said Kol Isha erva, right? But by Kriya Shema, it said Kol Zemer Isha. It had that word Zemer in there. So by general erva, any Kol Isha. Is that issur specific to singing? When we say Kol, it's interesting. It's not Zemer Isha is erva. It's Kol Isha erva. The voice, the noise that comes out from the Isha. Is that specific? Is it only singing issur, or is some other things issur as well? So the Beis Shmuel on the Shulchan Aruch says that you're allowed to listen, big heter, you're allowed to listen to a woman talk. You're allowed to listen to a woman talk. She's speaking, you're allowed to listen. Heter of the Beis Shmuel. But if it's anything that brings the hearer, then you wouldn't be allowed to, obviously. But if the woman's talking, the Beis Shmuel is matter for you to listen to her speaking. What about public speaking? So Dr. Rav Vosner, listening to a woman public speaking, that's an issur of Kol Isha. It doesn't say Zemer Isha by the general rights, it says Kol Isha. So any public speaking of a woman, Dr. Rav Vosner, that's issur. But Rav Vosner says that regular talking is allowed. Now, why is this? What's the difference between talking? How could talking be allowed, but public speaking is not allowed? It's really the same thing, just different amount of people listening. So Rav Vosner explains there's a difference. When you speak, you just give over words. When you talk to somebody. But when you're public speaking, you go and you project your voice. You change your tone. You try not to speak in a monotone. You change your tone up and down, trying to gain the attention of the listener. And therefore, that would be included in the issur of Kol Isha. And you can see the mashmois of where Rav Vosner is coming from. However, l'maisa, that's not necessarily the accepted psak across the board. The Hiris Nasan says that a woman speaker would be allowed as long as she's not speaking about intimate matters and you're not looking to get enough from her voice, it would be allowed. Rav Moshe was asked, is a woman allowed to give a shiur to men and women? So could you have a woman magid shir? Could she give shir on whatever it is? I don't know, Pirkei Avos, Nach, whatever it is. Could she give shir to men and women? So besides that being weird, is there a problem? So Ramosha says that as long as it's bakra, it's not a every Tuesday night thing. It's a once in a while type of thing. And the woman is sitting, not standing, and lichatchila, it should not be in a shul, it should be in a house, it would be allowed. So the Maisa, Rav Moshe didn't want it to get out of hand, so to speak, and be a big official event, a woman's speech, but at the end of the day, he clearly held that it wasn't b'chlal the issur of Kol Isha. Fine. The Chassam Sofer says something that's a little bit surprising to hear from the Chassam Sofer. I'm not surprised by the Vart, but if you know the shtickle of the Chassam Sofer, Preshberg, this is not what you would expect. But the Chassam Sofer says that if multiple women sing, then the issur would not apply. Trey Kol Mishtama. As the Gemara always says, you can't hear two things at once. And therefore, if there's two women singing at the same time, the issur would not apply. The Tzitz Eliezer says that he's not convinced that the Chassam Sofer meant this the halacha. It might have been a more lima type of idea, but he's not convinced that the Chassam Sofer meant this the halacha. The Bir Sheva and Tzvi Pesach Frank, and really almost all of the poskim follow this, say that even two women singing together at the same time is not allowed. There is no such heter. Now, there's going to be certain Gemaras and in Chazal, we're going to see proofs for and proofs against. The proof to allow a woman singing, to hear a woman sing when she's not by herself, is in Shoftim. We see that Devorah and Barak, who was one of the generals, they sing together Shiur to Hashem. They were not married to each other, Devorah and Barak, and they're righteous. And they sang together. So you see, Devorah sang in front of Barak because they were singing together, and that was seemingly allowed. Now, the argument against is that all that Trei Koli Lo Mishtama means is you can't make out what the words are. It doesn't mean that you don't hear it. You still hear the call. You might not be able to be yotza laning with two people laning at the same time because you can't make out the words. But it doesn't mean that you don't hear the call. And if you still hear the call, the chayra, it should be issur. Furthermore, the Gemara that we discussed earlier, where the men start and the women answer, or the women start and the men answer, that's mashma. We're talking about multiple women at the same time, and we still say it's issur. Third, we have a Gemara that says by Megillah, by Kriyas Megillah, even though in general by laning we don't allow two people to lane at the same time because Trei Kol Mishtama, you can't hear two people at once. But when it comes to Megillah, if two people are laning Megillah at the same time, that would count. You would be Yotzer. Why? Because Megillah is so chavav. It's so beloved Megillah, you're going to make it your business to listen carefully and hear anyways. You know, when it comes to the concept of listening to women sing, the Yetzer Hara is pretty good also. The Yetzer Hara knows how to make things chavav. And the Yetzer Hara might drag you in and make you be able to pay attention even when two women are singing at once. There's a famous tshuva from the Sidrei Eish. The Sidrei Eish is discussing, there was some group called the Issur group. It was like a kiruv movement post World War II. I think it seems like it was German-based people. It was in France at that time. They had fled to France, but they were having boys and girls sing together. It seemed to be like an NCSY group or a Bnei Akiva type group. It was a kiruv-based, maybe a little bit less than them. I don't know exactly, but like a kiruv group that they had boys and girls sing zemiras together and singing davening together. So the Sidrei Eish, there were many people that were fire against it, pun intended. And the Sidrei Eish actually was asked about it to give psak on whether they can continue to do this. And the Sidrei Eish quotes Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch and another Rav, who is it? Rav Hildesheimer, two of the great German Rabbanim, obviously Rav Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, and says that they were matter to allow boys and girls to sing together zemiras and davening for kiruv purposes. So he therefore says, the German Rabbanim were great people, and they were l'shem shemayim, and therefore he gave his blessing, so to speak, for them to continue this practice. He does mention, the Sidrei Eish mentions, the heter of trei koli le mishtame is not very convincing, and he did not really actually like the heter from a limit standpoint, but he said l'meisa, those great rabbanim held of it, and he adds another svara of, when you're davening and you're singing zemiris, the boys probably weren't focused on the girls singing when they were doing that. Maybe not, maybe yeah, okay. But l'meisa, for Kir, and he says something else, which is, I wanted to add this, I thought it was very interesting. The Sidrei Eish says, l'meisa, Shimshon Raphael Hirsch understood the chinuch of women better than the rabbanim of Poland and Lita. And that's why he was more successful at keeping the German Jews from when he got involved, versus of the women at least, versus the rabbanim of Poland and Lita, and therefore he knows what he's doing, so trust him. I thought it was a pretty interesting statement by the Sidrei Eish. I don't know enough about the history to know the accuracy of the statistics, but that's what the Sidrei Eish says. Okay, that's an interesting one. L'maisa, this machlokes lives on. In mainstream from world, we will not have women singing out loud, and we do not rely on this, and we are not okay with this. However, there are certain places where, some of these places are modern places, some of these places are kiruv type places, where you have, for example, by Kabbalah Shabbos, tons of men and tons of women coming to certain places, singing together out loud. And l'maisa, I believe, this is the type of thing, it very much depends on your view, but I believe that a lot of those women that go to those shuls view this as their main ruchnius connection of the week when they go for Kabbalah Shabbos. Now, I know there's going to be some people that are going to be screaming, that's not ruchnius connection, that's issur, that's gewalt, that's horrible, that's issur, that's bad. Well, there's going to be some other people say, l'maisa, they feel connected when they do that, and therefore it's a beautiful thing. I think the machlokes lives on. I think in mainstream world we don't do this, but I think for kiruv purposes, the basis of the Sidrei Eish, relying on Shimshon Raphael Hirsch that was then, l'chayr, that argument could still be made today. Fine. Something interesting that I remember, I couldn't find it this time, but the last time that I learned the sugya of Kol Isha, I came across, there's somebody, I don't remember who it is anymore, who says it, that when women are singing, multiple women are singing, there is no issur d'Rabbanan of Kol Isha Erva. However, you're still going against Das Yehudis. But for women that aren't so for kiruv purposes, you'd be allowed to go against Das Yehudis. I didn't find that, but I seem to remember that. Okay. Can you hear a woman sing if you can't see her and you don't know how she looks? So if you can't see her and you don't know how she looks, is there any heter of listening to her sing? So the Maisa, the Gemara in Sanhedrin says, Ein Yetzirah Sholet Ela Masha Ayin Royas. The Yetzirah only takes on that which the eye sees. So perhaps if you don't see her, then the Yetzirah doesn't chop you. And there's going to be no hearer. You don't know what she looks like. It's not going to catch your attention. And in fact, we have another Gemara in Megillah that says, whoever says Rachav was the name of a very famous Zaina, so whoever says Rachav will become a Balkari. So Rav Nachman says, I don't know what you're talking about. I could say Rachav from today to tomorrow, and nothing happens. I know there's no issue with saying Rachav. And the Gemara answers, yeah, Rav Nachman Shkoyach, that's because you never saw her. Because if it's something that your eyes have never seen, then it's not going to generate hearer. We have another Gemara in Avodah Zarah that says that there's an issur of looking at big day tzvayim, fancy clothes, of a woman that you recognize. And the Shulchan Aruch brings this. So, but implying that if you don't recognize the woman who owns the big day tzvayim, these fancy clothes, you're allowed to look at it. Once again, if you don't know how the woman looks, that's not going to generate hearer. So I'm going to say the same thing should be applied by Kol Isha. If you don't know how she looks, it won't generate hearer. However, there's a very strong argument against these rayas. The strong argument against these rayas are, who said that the issur of Kol Isha only applies if it brings a hearer? Even if it's true that the basis for the issur of Kol Isha is that it might bring hearer. But Lamaisa, the Pasha says that Kol Isha is a issur intrinsically. I don't care if it brings hearer. Can you go, let's say you have some ugly woman that's unsneous. Could you go and look at that ugly woman who's unsneous and it won't bring you to hearer? The answer is no. Since erva is a mitzias, even though the woman's ugly and it won't bring you to hear her, you're still not allowed to look. It's a mitzias of erva. So I don't care if you don't know how she looks and it won't bring you to erva, it won't bring you to hear her, listening to her sing. It's still a problem. Okay. Secondly, the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch never qualify and say the issur only applies if you know how she looks. They just say the issur in general. Therefore, if the Shulchan Aruch held it's only issur if you know how she looks, the Shulchan Aruch would have said it. And what's my proof? When it comes to looking at a big day tzvayim, the fancy clothes of a woman, it says it's only a problem if you know how she looks. It knows how to say that, and it didn't say that by Kol Isha, and therefore the Shulchan Aruch is not mashma like this heter. Lamaisa, Rabbi Vadia is mater with this heter. Rabbi Vadia says if you don't know how she looks, then you are allowed to listen to her sing. However, Rabbi Vadia says that if you know how she looks even from pictures, but you know how she looks because you've seen pictures of her, then you lose that heter and you can't listen to her sing. We're going to get to recordings in a second. Okay. So, Lamaisa, that's how Rabbi Vadia is mater. The general, almost everybody except Rabbi Vadia does not matter because of that. They still aser because they say Lamaisa, the svaras that we said, l'chayr it's an issur intrinsically. However, the other poskim do use it as a sniff leheter, as something that it counts as part of the equation. To if you have this heter and another heter, it could add up to a heter, but they don't view it as a heter in its own right. Fine. There's a Gemara that says, another proof I forgot to mention that Rabbi Vadia brings. There's a Gemara that says there are three things that bring Yishuv Adas. Kol, Mara, V'reach. A voice, look, smell. Bring Yishuv Adas. And the Gemara explains what's Kol referring to? Zemer Shel Isha, the singing of a woman, that brings Yishuv Adas. So Dr. Rabbi Vadia, how could you listen to a woman sing? Rabbi Vadia answers, it must be talking where you don't see her. And if you don't see her, you can listen to her sing. However, all those that aser, they can have it very easily. What is it talking about that it brings Yishuv Adas? Listening to your relatives sing. You don't have to say it's a woman that you don't hear. It's talking about listening to your relatives sing. What about listening to the radio? So, the Tzitz Eliezer, I'm sorry, I'm going to do it. The Tzitz Eliezer says a svara. Now, this part you want to listen to. The Tzitz Eliezer says a svara. The Tzitz Eliezer says that what is the radio? It's not her actual voice. It's electrically copycat of her voice. But it's not her actual voice. We know when it comes to mitzvahs, you can't listen to Megillah over the radio. It doesn't count because it's not the actual sound of Kriyas Megillah. So if Hashem's not going to allow us to be Mekayim a mitzvah, you think He's going to punish us for the Aveira? If it's either the voice or not the voice. However, the Tzitz Eliezer says, don't rely on this. I'm saying a svara, if you need b'shas atchak, you need something to rely on, I'm giving you a svara. But don't just rely on this l'chatchila. But if you have this, along with one of the other svaras, you don't know how she looks, etc., so there's what to rely on b'shas atchak, but don't rely on this l'chatchila. Now, who is it? The Chalkas Yaakov and the Shevet Levi and many others say there's no such heter by the radio. And by the way, they were talking about the radio. L'chayr, we could say the same thing by MP3, online, etc. Obviously, nobody who's listening, we're not talking about listening to the nivel peh of Goyish music. I don't think anybody's choshed that they would listen to the nivel peh of general Goyish music. Obviously not. But we're talking about listening to, obviously, a frum lady sing about very kaddish things. L'chayra, that's what we're talking about, I think. Right, everybody? Everybody agree? Good. Now, let's go back to a second talking about the idea that you're not allowed to listen to a woman sing while reciting Kriya Shema or learning. So the Ramah says, Kol haragol boy ain't erva. A voice that you're used to is not an erva. Now the Aruch HaShulchan explains that the way that I would expect it to be explained. That, let's say for example your wife. You're used to your wife singing. Your mother. You're used to your wife singing. It's very common to hear her sing, and therefore you're allowed to say Kriya Shema when your wife or mother is singing. However, the Mishnah Berurah takes a harder line than that, and it says, it's talking about what the Ramah is talking about when the Ramah says you could listen to her sing. When you listen to her call and say Kriya Shema, you could hear her speaking. You're used to hearing your wife speak, not sing. You're used to hearing your wife speak, and therefore you're allowed to say Kriya Shema while your wife is talking. Lefi this, I had an interesting shayla. Let's say you're a Hasidish chassan, right? You spoke to her for 20 minutes a year ago. You got married last night. Now it's the next day, and you want to say Kriya Shema, but she's talking on the phone, and you're not ruggled to hear her talk. Would you be allowed to say Kriya Shema? Lefi this cheshbon, you wouldn't be allowed to say Kriya Shema. I just thought it was interesting. I didn't see anybody discuss it. Okay. Can one sing Zmiras with his wife or mother? Because our Zmiras is a davar shebekadusha. Just like we said, you can't do Kriya Shema when a woman's singing. What about singing Zmiras with them? So Rav Yasha said you're not allowed to say Eishes Chayil's psukim. So Rav Yasha said you cannot sing Eishes Chayil together with your wife. That's psukim. And in general, Zmiras, you can only sing Zmiras with your wife if you don't say the Shem Hashem. You just say Hashem. You don't say the actual Shem Hashem. Rabbi Shlomo Zalman says you're allowed to sing Zmiras and you're allowed to sing Eishes Chayil, even though they're psukim, but you're not singing it l'shem Torah. You're singing it l'shem song. And since it's l'shem song and not l'shem Torah, it would be allowed. The Tzitz Eliezer and the Balei HaShulchan don't let you sing Zmiras with your wife. The Chazon Ish and the Stipler say it's issur to hear your sister sing. A lot of people are going to find this surprising, but the Chazon Ish and Stipler, it's issur to hear your sisters sing. Now the Sfarim bring down that the Brisker Rav let his daughters sing Zmiras in front of his sons. That's what's brought down in many Sfarim. I heard from Rav Kalas, he said that he asked Ramir Soloveitchik, the son of the Brisker Rav, and Ramir Soloveitchik said, fake news. He said it's not true. It's not a true story. The sisters never sang in front of the boys. It's just not true. Okay? So I guess it's not true. Fine. Diane Fisher and Rav Yashiv say you're allowed to hear your sister sing as long as you're used to, or your mother, whatever. No, sister. They're talking about sister, sorry. Diane Fisher and Rav Yashiv, you're allowed to hear your sister sing as long as you're used to it. As long as something you're used to. Well, how do you get used to it if you're not allowed to? Very simple. You heard them singing from when they were already young enough that they were allowed to sing. Or you were already young enough, you were under 9 before you got into that issur, then you could continue hearing them sing. Yes?
I thought Kol Isha means like something that it's like popular in the world at that time. Like I thought that was for like women who cover their hair. It's not considered erva by Kiddush.
Yeah. So, well, there is such, all the poskim pretty much reject that. There is such a havmin out there, but it's pretty much universally, I should actually speak what the suggestion was. The question was, doesn't kol haragol mean that once it's something that's commonplace in the world, therefore no longer has a din of erva? So almost all the poskim reject that. A lot of them discuss it slightly, bring it up to reject it. So it is not an accepted opinion. There must be somebody that actually says it. I saw a lot of people go against it. Usually there's a rule when a lot of the poskim are going against something, there usually is somebody that said it, that they're going against it to say that it's not true. I did not find the one who says it. So I didn't find anybody that actually says it's allowed, but I'm assuming there is somebody that says it's allowed because it's commonplace and used to it, but Lamaisa, all the poskim go against it. Fine. Now, Rav Shlomo Zalman says something which is kind of surprising. Rav Shlomo Zalman says you really shouldn't be listening to your daughter sing. Now, we never find any... when it comes to a sister, like the Shulchan Aruch says, you shouldn't hug and kiss your sister. We know you shouldn't have yichud b'kfiyas. You shouldn't move in with your sister. We see, everything's not free range with your sister. But when your daughter, we never see any isurim. So it's very surprising for Shlomo Zalman to say you shouldn't really hear your daughter sing. So we always, we never see any isurim. And further, there's a medrash, a famous medrash that we all know, which seems to be a kasha against Rav Shlomo Zalman saying. We know that Serach bas Asher sang to her grandfather Yaakov that Yosef Otchai, Yosef's still alive, as everybody knows in that famous medrash. Now, if Serach bas Asher is the granddaughters, if a daughter's a problem, then a granddaughter would for sure be a problem. And we see, Yaakov Avinu was pretty frum, and he listened to Serach bas Asher sing. You could give terutzim that maybe Serach bas Asher wasn't of age yet, or maybe it was a matzav of sakana. But it seems Lamaisa to be a pretty strong kash against Rav Shlomo Zalman. Lamaisa, the minig is not like Rav Shlomo Zalman. The minig is we have no problem for a father to listen to his daughter sing. Okay. Now, if you're stuck in a place where there are women singing, and you have some heterim, whether it's many women singing together, or it's recorded music or something like that, so Lamaisa, the poskim allow you to, so to speak, not pay attention to the singing. Try not to focus on the singing, and then continue to say Kriya Shema. Now, what is the reason for, or benching, or davening, or whatever it is? What's the reason for the poskim? So one of the basis for this heter is you have to look at the wording of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch, as the Gra and the Chida point out, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say Asur the Kriya Shema when there's Kol Isha. When it comes to Erva Mamish, the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch is Asur. But when it comes to Kol Zemer Isha, the Shulchan Aruch says Yesh Lazar. Rabbi say, words matter. Yesh Lazar be careful, isn't the same as Asur. Why does the Shulchan Aruch choose the Lashon Yesh Lazar as opposed to saying Asur? It's because you got to understand that the Rambam and the Rif say there's a general issur of listening to Erva, but there's no issur specific to Kriya Shema. So the Rambam and the Rif won't be allowed to say Kriya Shema if their, let's say, wife was singing. So therefore, we Lamaisa say Yesh Lazar. You should be careful not to, but it's not an absolute issur. Lamaisa, the Shulchan Aruch says be careful, so don't say Kriya Shema if there's women singing. But if you're stuck, there is what to rely on. Now, Lamaisa, we know that men have an issur of listening to women sing. Women have an issur of singing in front of men based on the concept of lifnei iver. If it's usher for men to hear, then women can't sing in front of men. Right? Simple enough. Rav Yosef says, and this is the type of real Yerushalayim question, where things are very concentrated, buildings are very close to each other. So Rav Yosef says that girls in a girls' school are allowed to sing. Even though those, the neighbors, and outside they're going to be able to hear the girls singing. But if they're in their place singing, they are allowed to. And what about the people outside? Somebody who lives next door to a girls' school, and they're going to hear women sing. How are they going to bench? So once again, there's going to be a heterim anyways. You don't know how they look. Trey Kylie, even though we're not so quick to rely on it, but in such a scenario, you just have to try to not focus on their singing and go and bench. They have a right to sing in their location. Rav Shlomo Zalman says that girls are not allowed to sing in front of a Jewish bus driver. So a lot of times girls, they like singing on the bus. Well, if the bus driver is Jewish, that's Rav Shlomo Zalman, they can't sing in front of the bus driver. So therefore, even though in general we try to give business to a Jew over a guy, Rav Shlomo Zalman says it's more kedai to hire a Goyish bus driver rather than a Jewish one. Because why? Because a Goy doesn't have an issur of listening to girls sing. It's not one of the Shev Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. and therefore the girls could sing in front of the Goyish driver. Rav Nissa Karelitz says, no, it's not sneeze for the girls to sing in front of a Goyish driver, and therefore would not be allowed. Lemaisa, the minhag is to be mekel, and girls will be allowed to sing in front of the Goyish driver. Another interesting one, the Aruch HaShulchan says that you are allowed to listen to a girl play an instrument. A girl violinist or something like that, you're allowed to. There's no issur. And Lemaisa, I didn't find any place to aser. So a lady playing the violin, playing the piano, whatever it is, one is allowed to listen to them play. Once again, if it brings here, that would obviously be a problem. But assuming that it's not bringing here, it would be allowed. There is no issur. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll take some questions.